and welcome to another SciFirst MovieTalk episode. So, in this episode, I will be discussing 2020's DC flick Birds of Prey, or, in fact, Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, as it's officially known. But for the sake of simplicity, we'll just call it Birds of Prey, as directed by Cathy Yan. Now, I know the situation regarding spoilers can be a tricky thing, and so I do usually try not to give too much away. However, it's hard to define what some people might find a spoiler of sorts, and I don't often do movie reviews for sort of more recent movies, so now that I'm not saying that there'll be too many spoilers in this episode, but just in case, as I don't want to spoil the film for anybody, I would switch off now if you don't want to hear any spoilers for the film at all. So, wait a minute, there you go. So, Birds of Prey acts as a sort of sequel cum follow-up to 2016's Suicide Squad, featuring, of course, the character of Harley Quinn, as played by Margot Robbie. Forgive me if I don't pronounce the name quite right. So that character was introduced in the previous film, but that is pretty much the extent of the connection, and is actually, I believe, technically part of the DC the cinematographic universe that started with 2013's Man of Steel, making it the 8th installment in the series. So, the film is set in Gotham City and sees Harley Quinn recently split from the Joker, Mr. J, and trying to pick up the pieces of her life and trying to find her independent self. The whole of Gotham City, it would seem, have other ideas, with seemingly everybody declaring open season on Harley now that she no longer has the protection of the Joker. Through a series of events, she ends up looking after a young pickpocket, Cassandra Cain, as played by Ella J. Basco, who, unbeknowingly, has picked the wrong pocket and has taken something of extreme value that, again, the whole of Gotham City appears to be looking for. But no more so than the main villain of the piece, the crime lord Roman Sionis, aka Black Mask, as played by Ewan McGregor. The film is, well, at least up until the final scenes, told from the point of view of Harley Quinn, and as a result, the story does jump around quite a bit, back and forth between different scenes, which, although it wasn't too confusing, it was a little off-putting at times. You just kind of get into one train of thought and then have to contend with doubling back on the story. There was actually a time when I forgot we were in a flashback and then had to quickly catch up with the rest of the film when it returned to the present. So, whilst it was an interesting take, especially with its use as a means to introduce the various characters, as with Harley telling the narrative, it almost felt like you were living the story through her scattered mind. And so it ended up being as disjointed and fragmented as it was. It was perhaps just a bit hard to swallow, is all I'm saying. I think this effect did, for me, make this part of the movie seem a little bit more drawn out as well. At points in the story, other characters are introduced into the film, which starts to form the the basis of the Bird of Prey element, including Dinah Lance, aka the Black Canary, as played by Jenny Smollett-Bell, if I've got that right, apologies if I haven't, Helena Bertinellini, aka the Huntress, as played by Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and Detective Renee Montoya, as played by Rosie Perez. They don't really make a team of sorts, more a coming together of different circumstances, which end up converging to a single point. Each has their own motives and beliefs, but ultimately are brought together to survive. It was, for me, a bit of a Harley Quinn show, which I'm not really complaining per se, just highlighting, in that most of the other characters didn't really feature in as much as perhaps you might have thought. None of them really shone through. Although, to be fair, it was always going to be hard in the shadows of Harley Quinn, no matter what, given the fact that the character is larger than life, as much as she is. And exceptionally played by Margot Robbie, I might add. It really seemed like she was having fun exploring the depths of the character more. Whether or not the Birds of Prey characters would be strong enough as characters in their own right to stand on their own is another thing altogether. It was hard to tell from what we saw. At times, and I might have picked up on the wrong vibes, but the rest of the cast sometimes just seemed a bit bored. I got the feeling that if you stripped away the Birds of Prey elements from the movie and didn't have those characters in it at all, you'd probably have almost the same film. They seemed a little bit surplus at times, like it was almost a forced attempt to bring in some new characters that we can then do something else with. I also found that Ewan McGregor's character as the actual villain Black Mask didn't get much screen time either, coming across as more of a sideshow, which I thought was a shame. Whilst I didn't think Ewan McGregor made the best villain, he did a reasonable job, and the polar nature of his character made for some very interesting scenes. Although I must say, he didn't really do very much, relying instead on his henchman, played by Chris Messina, who at times seemed more evil and deranged than he did. It almost seemed like they were building Ewan's character slowly into the Black Mask as the film progressed. But as we'd already been introduced to the character as the Black Mask early on in the film, I didn't get it. So it was a shame they didn't use this more throughout, I thought. So, saying all of that, is it worth a watch? Oh yeah. It's a riot from start to finish, if all but perhaps mistitled. As I've already stated, Margot Robbie follows up on her character of Harley Quinn in brilliant detail, and it's simply delectable the way that she expands on the role and makes it her own. It's simply worth a watch for that alone. She does spend a lot of time sort of moping around about her split with the Joker, which I suppose, of course, is an integral part of the character's development overall. But this is contrasted with her excellent sarcastic wit, which I loved, along with the way that they integrated Harley's knowledge of psychiatry, which I thought was amusing, but also, at the same time, a clever way to show how strong a character she really, really was, and that beneath all of the madness, there was still some of Harley and Quinn Zell left, this being, of course, the name prior to being transformed into Harley Quinn by the Joker. A really nice touch, I thought. The movie has an excellent intro sequence, which is cleverly executed as a way to introduce Harley's backstory without making it too repetitive or bogged down in details. It's snappy and to the point, which sets the scene for the movie superbly. It had some amazing fight sequences, which were just exquisitely choreographed and absolutely a blast to watch, set to some fantastical musical numbers such as Spider-Bait's Black Betty and Hart's Barracuda. Just some of the things Harley fans to use in fights is just simply hilarious. So, saying that, the soundtrack is also worth a mention. The score was brilliantly set to the film, with music composed by Daniel Pemberton, and aptly set up the world of Harley Quinn with some excellent mixes and integration of other songs, such as those previously detailed for the fight scenes, but also at pieces such as Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend and Sway With Me, sort of thrown in there for good measure. That carrying on, one of the things I did really like about Suicide Squad, its soundtrack. The film is, well, kind of imagine the film you would get if you mashed up and hit over the head a few times and boiled for a few hours in a good way. The likes of the classic 1966 Batman movie, Sucker Punch, Logan, Suicide Squad and Deadpool, with a sprinkling of each in the movie, but with the movie not being any one of them at the same time. Deadpool kind of being the closest, in my opinion, as the movie did carry a lot of the style Deadpool had, especially given the way the film was narrated by the main character, and given that both are quite brazen in their execution. Is it Deadpool? Well, no. It's not quite as good as that, in my opinion. But it is much better than Suicide Squad. For the sake of that, it was a lot more adult and had a grittier take on its characters. The film exemplifies some of the qualities that Suicide Squad should have had, basically. Interestingly, there was very little reference, well, no serious reference. There were a couple of Easter eggs, which I did see crop up in the film, to any other film in the DC universe. DC do seem to be taking this direction with a couple of their most recent releases, with the likes of Aquaman and Shazam, almost being able to stand out and be classified as standalone movies. You of course know that they're in the universe, they just tend to shy away from making a big thing about it. Harley only references a couple of points from Suicide Squad. It was nice that they didn't forget about it altogether, or ignore it completely, as I am sure that would have been quite tempting. But they were only brief references as part of the overall kind of introduction to Harley Quinn and some of her recent history. So, overall, in my opinion, the movie is sort of like a wild rollercoaster ride, which doesn't quite manage to get to its top speed, but does provide enough thrills and spills along the way to be a fantastical film and very entertaining nonetheless. Don't get me wrong, it can be quite surreal at times, given that you are supposed to be living the movie through the mind of Harley Quinn. But I think that definitely that adds to its quirkiness and its overall enjoyment. So, that brings me to the end of this episode. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you have enjoyed it. Please do leave a like on this episode if you have, and of course please do subscribe to the channel where there are plenty more reviews to kind of watch and other assorted movie related antics. So yeah, please leave any comments that you feel free that you want to do, and yeah, I just hope you've enjoyed it. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.